Hello, everyone. You're listening to the Small Business Show. I'm your host, Swire Ho. My guest today is Stephen Houraghan. He is a freelance designer turned brand strategist, the founder of Brand Master Academy, and the host of the Brand Master podcast. Stephen shares experience, know how, and proprietary brand strategies to tens of thousands of students and follow through the Brand Master Academy programs, podcast, and YouTube channel, and the growing brand strategy community. Welcome to the show, Stephen.
Thanks very much, Swire. Thanks for having me.
I have a lot of questions surrounding branding to ask you, but before that, for those of us who are not yet be familiar with you and your work, what should they know about you?
Well, I'm a freelance designer turned brand strategist. I say freelance designer. This is going back some 10 years or so, and over time, I started to ask bigger questions about what I was doing because, you know, I believed in the thinking behind the designing, and that kind of opened up this world into, well, what am I actually building here? Who am I building it for? And that came into this realm of your target audience and differentiation strategy and positioning strategy, and it opened up this world of brand strategy, which I knew very, very little about at the time. And what I've learned in the last 10 years or so is that there is a massive education gap on what real branding actually is. A lot of people believe it's their logo or their website, when in fact, that's a small fraction of what their brand is. So today I share those systems and those frameworks with professional brand builders, designers, social media managers, copywriters, so that they can provide a higher level of service to their clients, and their clients can build brands based on strategy and not just visuals.
You bring up a lot of good point, and I wanted to ask you that. It's kind of a big question, and as you say, people think to be branding, you just only have a logo, right? You have some colors out there. And in my world, people think branding is just throw out a bunch of pants with your logo on it. That's branding. But to your point, going deeper, what would you consider branding is?
Well, we can all kind of relate, whether consciously or subconsciously, to what branding is, because we all have relationships with brands. Now, a very good litmus test that I like to do is to ask people, when was the last time you ever bought something based on a logo? Now, 9.9 times out of 10, the answer that I get is never. That's not how we make decisions. We don't make decisions based on how a logo looks. We base our decisions, our buying decisions, based on how brands communicate to us and resonate with us in terms of the value that they offer and the experience that they take us through. And that is what branding is. It's really about understanding who your audience is, what segment of the market you want to go after, how you're different from your competitors, and what reason you're going to give that audience to choose you over them. At the crux of it, at the center point of branding, that's what branding is all about. It's about giving your audience a reason, a compelling reason at that, to choose you over your competitors, not just once, but long term.
That's a really good soundbite for me. I'm definitely going to cut it out. So what you're saying, if I illiterate, even in the promo world, for example, we're going to a concert, right? We buy a $50, T-shirt for the band with band's logo on it. So we're not just buying the logo. We want to be associated actually with the band, with the type of music that we like, with the community that we like. So there are a lot of building process behind that before we actually give a credit card for a $50 T-shirt. Is that the kind of the message that you encourage
Yes,
company to think about?
and I do like the music group analogy as well, because you cannot just turn up, say that you're a music group, and put a logo on a T-shirt. In order for you to get the T-shirt to the point where people are going to buy it, you have to build something in the background first. You have to have music that your audience likes. You have to build trust over time that you're not just a one-hit wonder, and you can continuously create music that they're going to like. You also have to display certain types of attributes, maybe wear certain types of clothes to confirm to them that you are their type of people. And only after you do this over a long term, over, consistently over time, will they be prepared to pay for a ticket to go to your show and then buy that t-shirt to put on them to represent you and say that, yes, I am one of them. So I really like the music group analogy. There's a lot of work. Any musician will tell you to get to the place where they're able to sell t-shirts with their logo on it. The logo is not going to sell the t-shirt. The logo means nothing without all that music, all that effort behind getting the logo on the t-shirt.
I think you touched on that point, but I really wanted to dig deeper. And you mentioned that the visual, right, which in that case of a T-shirt is your logo, right? It's not your brand. So what is the brand? And for a lot of designer, even for marketing director from companies, they think that we design a logo, we design a color, just flush the market with all the color, and then people will remember us. Is that true?
Well, your visuals are probably only around about 10% of your brand, and your visuals have a very, very specific role to play. They're there to make this visceral connection and to generate memorability. You want to communicate through your visuals that you are a certain type of brand, but that's the main role of the visuals. Once somebody comes to your website, or once you interact with a person on one of the many touch points you have across your brand, your visuals are only going to get you so far. And when we talk about branding, as I mentioned before, we're talking about the method that we use to connect a person with a business. Okay. And visuals are not going to do that for you. They will make an instant connection, a visual connection, but that's all it's going to do. There is a lot more that you have to do to build that relationship on the back of it. And if you don't have your strategic ducks in a row, then you're not going to be able to make that connection. Before you design any other elements, before you build any other elements of your brand, you have to know who your audience is. Because if you don't know who your audience is, then the messaging is not going to be on point. The positioning strategy is not going to be on point because you don't know what their challenges are and you don't know what they want. It's not until you get crystal clear about who they are and what segment of the market that you're going to go after can you then decide, okay, well, this is the type of challenge that this segment of the market has, and this is how we can be different compared to those competitors. This is the reason that we can give them to choose us over them. And most people, they skim over the relevance or the importance of that level of branding. That level of branding is really about understanding who you're trying to connect your business to, and then finding that compelling reason to give them to choose you over your competitors. And as I said, your visuals are not going to do that for you. You need a brand in the background of those visuals to make that connection. And that goes through within your messaging strategy, the stories that you tell, the personality that you show up with, the attributes that you use throughout your communication. There are so many different elements to how a brand can connect with its audience.
Well, I love it. And while you were talking, I'm thinking about how many keywords that you use are similar to sales, right? In sales, I always tell listeners to find your target audience, right? You have to connect with them, and then you have to basically make your case. Are you serving their pain point, or are you helping them to be better, right? Then that's how you can get the sell. I'm surprised to coming from a brand strategist like yourself that branding usually also go into thinkings like that. So how would you guide a company or a person, nowadays we're talking about personal branding, to find the branding, because a lot of the conversation, especially in sales and I'm sure in branding too, I don't want to miss out. I sell clothing, right? I need to market everyone buys a t-shirt. So how would you advise and how would you narrow down the search for a potential client?
Well, it's first of all deciding, you know, what type of person are you going to make t-shirts for? are you going to provide design services for? What type of business do you want to serve? Because there's an old adage: you cannot be all things to everybody. That is the quickest way to blend in. So within any given market, there are multiple groups of people that could potentially want or need what you have to offer, whether it's a t-shirt or whether it's design services. Now, if you just simply say, well, I'm for everybody, or if you try to take a massive slice of the market, say for example, I am for small business, or I offer design services for small businesses. Now, that is that is not a way to be relevant to a certain group of people, because I don't know about you, Swar, but even though I come from a small business background, when somebody says small business to me, I don't think, yeah, that's me. It's when they call me out for my title or the type of person that I am or the specific challenges that I go through, that's when they get my attention. So
Hmm.
you have to get crystal clear on exactly who you want to target, who you want to make t-shirts for, who you want to provide design services to, because it's when you get crystal clear on who they are, can you get into the nitty gritty of their individual challenges. And it's when you understand how those people are different to everybody else in that market, can you tailor your messaging to them. And when you tailor your messaging to them, they hear those types of messages a lot clearer than they would hear generic messages that are tailored to small businesses, for example. So it's all about relevance. It's all about knowing exactly who your audience is, so you can tailor your messaging, you can tailor your branding, you can tailor the attributes that you use throughout your personality, throughout your visual identity to appeal to that specific person.
Well, I really like that. And, not to say you don't, well, if you target it to everyone, you're targeting to no one. I really like that analogy. And especially, for a brand, if you wanted to target everyone, you're thinning out all your resources, right? You're not focused. So whenever someone comes along and call you or email you, then you lose sight of your focus. So that's a really good strategy. So what is the right way in your opinion to build a brand strategy?
Well, everything within branding starts with the audience. So that's 101 of branding. You have to really know who it is that you're providing services or providing products for, because at the end of the day, without those people, there is no need for your brand to exist. There's absolutely no need for your brand to exist. Now, once you know the people who you want to target, who you want to serve, then you have to decide, well, how am I going to offer my services to them, or how am I going to offer something different to them than what's already in the market? Because if you just show up, even if you are very specific about who you want to serve, if you just show up and offer the same as your competitors are offering, you're not giving them a reason to choose you. So, knowing who your audience is and knowing what reason they should choose you is the center point of branding. When you get that crystal clear, when you get that dialed in, then you build everything else around your brand. And when I say everything else, I'm talking about how you show up as a business, your brand personality, your messaging strategy. What types of messages are you going to put out there in the market? Are you going to use storytelling as a strategy? What kind of stories are you going to tell? And then, looking inward at the brand, you know what's the reason that we exist beyond that transaction, when we move past the serving the client, and when we've scratched that itch for the client as to what they're going to get and the value that they're going to receive by doing business with us. How else can we show them that we're a brand that they would want to do business with? What is our purpose? What is our reason for being beyond money? If we were to remove money out of the equation, why is it that we do what we do? So again, once you know that audience and you know how you're going to be different, you build everything else around that. And it's not until you get to the outer limits do you then come to the visual identity and the logo? So, as we spoke about early in the show, most people start on the periphery. They start with the logo and the visuals when they haven't looked internally. They haven't looked at exactly who they're trying to target, exactly how they're going to be different, and the personality and the attributes they're going to use to show up as a brand. So that's how you develop strategy. You start from the inside out with the customer, with the difference that you're going to make in the market, the difference you're going to offer to these customers, and the role that you're going to play in their lives. And then you define how you're going to show up, the personality and the attributes, the language and the tone of voice that you're going to use, the messaging and the stories that you're going to tell. And only then do you work on how your brand is going to look and feel out there in the marketplace.
Yeah, I love that. And for those of you who are listening, to Steven speaks, and if you are going into market doing everything the same as your competitor, the only thing that you can compete is price. You can do discounts, you can do coupon, but then you're beating yourself up. At some point, then you have no profits. But if you think about something that we are really related to, it could be a clothing brand, it could be a band that you like, or it could be a sports teams that you like. We spend a lot of money onto it, and what it does, with the right branding strategy, after we finish ordering, like you touch on, Stephen, we actually go out and no one is paying us and to review them. And some of us are, we are all journalists right now. We have a cell phone. Sometimes we go live, we post on our social media and tell others about our experience, how good this brand or experience or product that I just purchased. So these are all branding strategies that you can plan on, getting the customer's journey. So you actually subconsciously coach them and encourage them. This is something that, user generated content is, I would argue is the best strategy, that you don't have to pay, but, can pay off to your company handsomely.
Yeah, and you touched on something a little earlier as well, Swire, about you know about the cost of marketing. If you do your due diligence correctly, and you are crystal clear and focused on who you're targeting and how you're going to target them, your marketing is going to be so much cheaper, so much more efficient, so much more cost effective than if you tried to target the whole market. If you make every single dollar count within your marketing budget, then your business is going to benefit. And the best way to do that is to be crystal clear on exactly who you're trying to target and exactly how you're going to be different. And then that becomes the center point of everything you do. When you're able to look at exactly who your audience is, then you can look at, okay, well, what type of challenges do they have really? On a day-to-day basis, what type of challenges do they have? And you can make a list of 100 challenges or 100 questions that they might have quite easily. Now you might think, well, 100 questions or 100, that seems like a lot, but you'll find very quickly that you can name 10 very easily, and each one of those 10 splinters off into 5 or 6 more, and all of a sudden you have 50 questions or 50 challenges, and you go out then into the marketplace and you start to help your particular audience with those challenges. But it's very, very important that you know where those people are. You know exactly who those types of people are, because if you try to go into, big group of small businesses and you have no way to resonate with who they are, then you're going to be fighting with all of those other people in there, and you're not going to be as relevant to them. And it's so much easier to ignore those types of messages.
Yeah, and that's a really great point. For example, just to play, some example in listeners' head. If I mention now motorcycle, if I mention now coffee, if I mention now sleeping mattresses, we already have a brand in mind. Even if you never driven a motorcycle, you already know Harley Davidson. People
Mhm.
put tattoo on their arms, right? No one is paying them to do it. They do it, because they really want to be associated with the
And
brand. And
and that's it. And that's a super important word, association. When we think of brands, and Harley Davidson is a great example. You know, the people who are into Harleys, or who would wear a Harley T-shirt, or get a Harley tattoo, it's not just the bike that they're buying into. they're part of a tribe, they're part of a way of life. And buying that brand is a way of saying, you know, this is who I am. We adopt brands. We don't buy brands. We adopt brands, and we make them part of our lives because they represent in part, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, who we are as people. The attributes that they display within their messaging, within their imagery, within their advertising. If they display attributes or they display characteristics that speak to us and resonate with us, that's when we go, huh, yes, that's my type of brand. That's a brand that I can buy into. And we can all relate to this because we all have those relationships with different types of brands. And in self-analyzing those relationships and what we think and what we feel about those brands, we already subconsciously know a lot of this stuff. We already know that, we didn't buy this brand over here because of the logo. We bought that brand because of what it represents. And it represents that to us because for however many years, this brand has been putting out these types of messages. So that's what you want to think about with your own brand. What types of messages can I put out there to the certain type of people I want to serve, where they're going to see those messages and go, yes, that's me. I can relate to that.
And I would say that if you really took your time to answer those questions that Stephen mentioned and create your brand, you can actually charge more money for that. There are motorcycle that are out there. There's Harley out there that people actually pay up for it, and also for going back to clothing, going back to band. And if I put my face on a T-shirt, if I give it to Stephen, he probably won't take it. But for his favorite band, he is able to, he is willing to pay up for it. So imagine that you took the time really to resonate with your target audience, and then you can actually ask for more money for your product and services
Yeah,
to justify,
and Apple is the perfect example
right.
of that. Really, when we get down to it, the technology that's inside a Samsung phone and an Apple phone, they're not too dissimilar. But the way Apple has gone about their branding, the strategies that they've put in place, the ecosystems they've created, the brand experience they've created from opening that box to going into a store, this is not by accident. This is all by design. And because they've done it through strategy and they've thought about the types of people who they want to attract and represent, and the type of brand experience that they want to give them, they're able to charge so much more than all these other brands simply by creating that perception in the mind of their audience.
Okay. So wanted to ask you a question, and I know it's we have to know obviously who the target audience be, but let's assume it's a small business, right? So they have limited resources, and
Mm-hmm.
let's assume that they identify who their target audience will be. What are some of the tips that you would suggest to start reaching out, to and grow their community?
Yeah, so once they know who their audience is, there's another very, very critical step before they start reaching out to that audience, and that is defining what reason they're going to give that audience to choose them over their competitors. Now, I know from experience speaking with small business owners, 9 out of 10 small business owners cannot tell you right now why we should choose their brand over their nearest competitors. And if they can't tell us, then how are we supposed to make that decision for ourselves? So we really need to get crystal clear on the difference that we're going to make in the lives of the audience that we want to target. Now, there are a few different ways to do this. Of course, you can compete on price, but if you compete on price, you're a commodity, and it's not going to take long before somebody comes in and undercuts you. Competing on price is not the way to build an effective or a successful brand. There are many different ways that you can compete within your market and offer something different to your market. If you think about Uber, for example, for years, the status quo was that, we picked up our phone and called a taxi. The taxi showed up and we jumped in, or we hailed down a taxi, we jumped in, and they took us to where we wanted to go. And then Uber, they made a slight adjustment. Of course, they they had some brilliant development involved in creating this app and creating this ecosystem, but a slight tweak on that brand experience, and then somebody is able to just jump on their app, order their Uber shows up. There is no transaction in terms of money, and it's a seamless experience. There are so many different ways that we can look at other brands for inspiration to say, well, how did they get an edge in their marketplace, and how would that be applicable to me if I was to do something similar? And look, it's not always about the outcome. Uber and taxis got their customers from destination A to destination B. 9 times out of 10, you're able to differentiate by the experience that you bring your audience through. So you might have a very similar outcome to your competitors, whether it's providing, logo and website services, or providing, advertising services, or you know, uh, lawyer services, whatever your business is. The outcome is quite often the same. The offer of the outcome is quite often the same, but the experience that you take them through can be completely different. The way you onboard your clients, the way you speak to them, the information that you provide them with, the relationships that you build, the end-to-end experience from start to finish. If you give them something that they can talk to their friends about, then you're creating a brand that's easily shareable, that's easy for brand advocates to stand up and say, yeah, that's my brand over there. That's a brand that I would recommend. Now, going back to your question, once you are crystal clear about who your audience is and the difference that you're going to make, then it's about being consistent with that message, being consistent about, this is the difference that we offer, and this is the methodology that we use to get you from point A to point B. And then go out into the marketplace, join groups, create content, and answer those 100 challenges, answer those 100 questions, whether it's through questions on forums, or creating a piece of content to answer that question, creating a video to answer this question, and then sharing that across all your distribution channels. So that is the way to get clear, to resonate with who your audience is. Identify them, call them out in your messages, call them out in your posts, and say, this is you. And, then deliver your value through highly valuable content answering those questions.
I think technology has made it somewhat easier to find that option, especially depending on what your industry is. You could create, groups on Facebook, Discord, or any forums that you might have. You can actually, if you're smart, look at what people are talking about you, right, in those forums. And if you don't make those changes, you can actually build a community that will actually defend you, right? Whenever you get into somewhat a PR situation, you mentioned Apple, people are diehard fans. They'll only use Apple product and will defend Apple product whenever there's a controversial happen. So now I think it's actually easier. Would you agree to building a brand by actually listening to what the actual user are saying?
Yeah, look, it's a double-edged sword, right? If you think about 20 years ago, you wanted to start a business, let alone build a brand. Your marketing options were not what we have today. You could choose TV. You probably wouldn't have the budget for it. Even radio, you probably wouldn't have the budget for it. Maybe some local radio stations. Then you had the yellow pages. Then you had print advertising. You had a lot of outlay before you had any kind of feedback, and you didn't get digital marketing metrics back then that was able to tell you your click-through rate, or your response rate, or your conversion rate, or anything like that. So from that point of view, it is so much easier today. You can simply create a Facebook manager account. You can place ads there. The same with Google, the same with LinkedIn. Getting ads out there is so much easier today, or getting in front of audiences for free is also so much easier. You create a piece of content that can rank in Google and then show up in Google when people search for that keyword, or you can create a podcast where you interview somebody with a reputation in your industry, and you ask them questions, and all of a sudden you're aligning yourself with a big name within your industry. There are so many different strategies that you can use today to get in front of your audience. The platforms and the availability and the audience is not the problem. It's getting the right content and the right messages to the right people. That is the big challenge today, because along with all of these platforms, there is so much noise, and we are bombarded with all of these messages. So it's not until you get crystal clear on who your audience is that you can actually call them out by their title or by the types of challenges that they have or what they believe, that you can get their attention. So, as I said, the amount of platforms that is out there, the availability of audiences, that's not the problem. Getting the right message in front of them, asking very, very relevant questions in a way that's going to resonate with them, that's what's going to get you traction today.
Hmm. That's good advice. It's not how many platforms you're on, it's how many times you can say no to something that is not relevant to you, at least at this point, right? So you don't stretch yourself too thin.
Yeah, it's about getting into it's about knowing where your audience is, where they congregate. And again, if you're not crystal clear on who your audience is, then you're going to come up with vague answers, and you're going to go into groups that are diluted, where you don't have your specific target audience there, and your messages are going to, they're not going to hit home, because there are not enough people that you want to target within that group. When you get crystal clear on who you want to target, then you can get crystal clear with where they congregate. And then you can go in there with messaging that is going to resonate with them a lot more. And that's when you can start to build a name and a reputation within those groups and within those ecosystems as somebody who knows what they're talking about, and who can actually help this group of people. So yes, there are plenty of groups out there. When you know who your audience is, then you can find out where they congregate. And then when you show up with relevant messaging, that's when you start to get noticed.
So, Stephen, I know that we can really go very deep, but for listener who wanted to reach out to ask you more question about branding and about your podcast, where should they go and find you?
Yeah, well, brandmasteracademy.com is where you can find my website. If you want to dive deeper into brand strategy, then our YouTube channel has got hundreds of videos on there now at this stage, and it goes into fine detail of all of the strategies that I was talking about, whether it was brand messaging, positioning, storytelling, target marketing. You can learn about all of that through the YouTube channel. If you just jump onto YouTube and search brandmasteracademy.com, or, as I said, jump onto YouTube and search for Brandmaster Academy, or jump onto brandmasteracademy.com, and that will take you wherever you want to go.
Thank you so much, Stephen, for coming on today. I learned a lot from you.
No problem, Swar. Thanks very much for having me on.